Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I have the distinct privilege of welcoming back a remarkable guest, Elizabeth Field. Elizabeth is the Chief Operating Officer at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation to discuss this year's upcoming Elizabeth Dole Foundation convening. Welcome, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We talked around this time last year talking about the 10th annual national convening, and we're welcoming you back to do another pre-convening interview to talk about this year's convening. I know there's a lot of exciting rollouts and, different things this year. And I really want to start with, though, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation has been championing military and veteran caregivers for over a decade. For viewers and listeners who may be new to your work, can you share a little bit about the foundation's mission and why this annual convening has become such a cornerstone event?
Absolutely. And I know so many of your listeners know who a caregiver is, what they do, why it's so important, why it's so valuable. So I won't go into that in depth, but what I will say is unique about the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is that we primarily support caregivers to those who have served in our military. Some of them might still be active duty, others are veterans. But Elizabeth Dole, Senator Dole, who of course has an illustrious career as president of the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, and a senator and a cabinet secretary in more than one agency. She, of course, was also the beloved wife of the late Senator Bob Dole. And when Senator Dole was with Bob at Walter Reed Army Medical Center back in the early 20-teens, I believe it was, she recognized that there were a lot of family members there who were caring for service members who had come home from Iraq or Afghanistan, in many cases just catastrophically injured. And she realized three really important things. The first was that there was really no one there to support them, the caregivers. The second was that these injuries were really devastating, and so many of these men and women coming back from the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan were very young. And so you had family members, whether it was a spouse or a sibling or a parent, who overnight has seen that their loved one is not necessarily going to have the future they were going to have, and instead might be looking at decades of caring for them in a way that they just never imagined. And so she really realized that they needed support because they were facing a very long road. And then the last thing she realized is that as she started to bring these caregivers together, whether it was in group dinners that she hosted or just walking the halls at Walter Reed and talking with them and introducing them to one another, that there was real power in the connection among them. And so she realized that there is likely a real need here that no one is meeting, and maybe I can meet it, which is a very Senator Elizabeth Dole thing to do. She is, as you know, a Presidential Medal of Freedom honor recipient, and the reason is because whenever she sees a problem, she wants to fix it. And so she commissioned the first ever study of military and veteran caregivers. It indeed confirmed that there are millions of Americans caring for someone who was wounded, ill, or injured serving our country, and she managed to create this foundation that is now almost 15 years old. We have grown and we serve a really large population.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, this is your second time joining us for a pre-convening conversation. And our pre-convening, episode from last year, you had walked us through how the RAND findings helped to inform your strategic plan, which was the main focus of last year's convening. Now walk us through how those findings, combined with what you learned at the convening, ultimately came together to form the National Blueprint for Action, which is launching at this year's convening.
That's right, and that was a great summary. So, as you know, because we talked about it last year, our strategic plan, which we issued in February of 2025, articulated what the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is going to do for this population to support military and veteran caregivers around those 4 pillars of strengthening mental and emotional wellness, improving economic mobility, supporting children and families in reaching better outcomes, and then enabling these supportive ecosystems that really give caregivers what they need. And that was, of course, the first thing we needed to do. That was where we're going to start as an organization, is where are we going to put our time and our attention and our resources. But we also know that we cannot do everything, and that the needs of military and veteran caregivers, and really caregivers across the nation, whether they're caring for someone who has served, are quite, there are many of them, and they're also varied. And so the idea behind last year's convening, in addition to really centering around our strategic plan, was to start bringing in the community. And by the community, I mean everyone from caregivers to nonprofit organizations that support caregivers, to research organizations, to corporate partners, around what they could do to complement the work we are doing through the strategic plan, as articulated in the strategic plan. And so you'll remember that last year there was a big breakout session in the afternoon where we started to have these facilitated conversations around how different stakeholders from different sectors could stand up, and what types of needs they saw and what types of solutions they also thought they might be able to provide. Fast forward a year later now, we had worked very hard along with our partners at KPMG to take the outputs from last year's convening, specifically those afternoon breakout sessions, to work with some leaders in this space around, again, those 4 pillars, and really workshopped in a very long multi-stage process, refining and collecting and documenting all of those ideas into what is now our National Blueprint for Action for supporting military and for supporting military and veteran caregivers.
Oh, it's fantastic, Elizabeth. And, why do you believe the National Blueprint for Action is such a game changer for the military and veteran caregiver community?
Yeah, a few reasons. The first is that it is sort of the first tool of its kind. There are, and this is really important to say, there are national strategies and tools and activations and coalitions around supporting caregivers across the nation, and this complements them. But it's the only one that is specific to military and veteran caregivers. And so that is unique and that is important. The other reason that I think it's a real game changer for military and veteran caregivers is that it is designed to be both an interactive tool, and I'll talk about that in a second, as well as a call to action. So if someone who is a corporate partner, an employer, let's say, or a company that produces home medical supplies, they can go to the blueprint, which is going to be a website that we'll release at convening, and they can filter and search the recommendations in the blueprint. They can filter by sector, so they might pick corporate, and then they might say, well, the goods that we produce are really about helping with mental and emotional wellness, so I'm going to also filter by mental and emotional wellness. And that automatically pulls up a list of very concrete, practical steps that they can take to support caregivers, whether it's in their company as employees or in their community or through the products that they produce, their commercial products. So that's the first thing, is that it's interactive and it's very easy to use and it's practical. The other reason is, again, this call to action. So we are asking our partners, and this will start at the convening, but we hope that this is a multi-year effort, asking partners from across the country to share with us how they are using the blueprint to activate it, to take those recommendations and make things better for caregivers that they support and interact with.
That's fantastic. We spent a lot of time talking to individuals at last year's convening, and especially with people that had attended the breakout sessions. What were some of the most powerful or even surprising things that you had heard from caregivers and industry leaders at that event that really helped influence where you're headed this year?
Yeah, I have sort of a process answer to that question, and then a sort of a heartfelt answer to that question. On the process side, which I feel like I should start with as a chief operating officer, we really saw in those breakout sessions that there were some voices in the room who clearly were yearning to be a continued part of this conversation and who really were going to show some leadership in this space. And so a lot of those organizations and people from last year's convening in the breakout sessions became part of that multi-stage process that I referenced earlier that we did with KPMG. And so it's a very concrete way in which literally the same people that we started the conversation with, we continued the conversation with, and now they'll be at the convening again this year. In terms of heart, I have to say that the breakout session around kids and families was one of the most meaningful moments for me in the convening, to see the level of enthusiasm and also, quite frankly, the level of need that exists. There are at least 5.5 million kids in the United States who are living with a veteran or a service member who needs care, and a lot of times those kids are helping provide that care. And that can be both a wonderful thing and a gift, and it can also be a very difficult thing. And so we really saw at the convening true excitement around what schools or pediatricians or faith-based institutions or philanthropic institutions could do to support this, largely hidden population. And I think you'll see when we launch the blueprint at this year's convening that there's just a lot of really exciting momentum around supporting these kids and families.
That's amazing. And, just to kind of give a plug for, you guys at Elizabeth Dole Foundation, you do have a resource and a program now for hidden heroes and, hidden helpers for these children who are, helping their veteran parent or, older sibling or what have you. And there were some just powerful speakers that, shared those, experiences last year at the convening. And, I just think it's remarkable the work you guys do. As, I say all the time, it's our favorite organization because my father, having been a veteran Marine and having a military family, I just think it's, tremendous the amount of resources and support that, Senator Dole and, the foundation has really poured into our veterans and supporting them, but subsequently the caregivers supporting them as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, it is very meaningful work, and as you have, I'm sure, witnessed and gathered from speaking with not just me but members of our team, our entire staff and fellows, and I'm sure we'll talk about fellows in a little bit, are so passionate about this mission, and it makes the work that we do and coming to the office every day just feel like a privilege. And I want to also note that we have now a number of personal lived experiences, stories from our fellows of making that transition from hidden helper, which is how we refer to those kids, to hidden hero. And in fact, we have one of our Dole caregiver fellows this year in our newest class of fellows whose father was selected as a Dole caregiver fellow in the prior class because he, despite being a veteran, was also caring for his wife, a veteran, who has significant needs. Well, over time, that husband has and dad has had a number of health complications himself, and so his son is now a new fellow in the Dole Caregiver Fellowship Program, supporting the two of them, and it's just one of those unique family stories that you can really only get through the type of intentionality, I think, that Senator Dole and the foundation really give to supporting people who just don't think anyone even realizes what they're going through.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, you're often giving a voice to the voiceless. We, just outside of military in general, so often caregivers feel like they're alone. They don't have that peer support necessarily if their peers haven't gone or are going through the same experiences. And, you're kind of elevating that voice and, giving it that platform, but also the support, which I just think is tremendous. The blueprint really is designed to mobilize employers, policymakers, health systems, and community leaders. What does it actually look like to get all of these different players aligned around a shared goal? And before you answer that, something that is still stuck out to this day from last year's convening, I was speaking to a woman who was an executive at the Blue Star Families, and we were at kind of the after event, if you will, and we were just chatting and things, and she was asking our background, and we were asking hers, and she came, she was in the public sector and now went to the government sector, and she was just explaining how if you look around that this event is the one place where all of these different, backgrounds are coming, whether it's private, public, government, what have you, nonprofit, the whole nine yards, nonpartisan, both sides of the aisle all unite for this one commonality to support these veterans and the caregivers. And I just thought that was really powerful when you put it into that perspective. And now the blueprint is really designed for that. What's it like to get all of these different players aligned around that shared goal?
I mean, it's so exciting. We knew we could do it, but it's still quite an effort and a labor of love pulling this blueprint together. And truly, to your question about bringing different voices and different sectors together, that is very much also the power behind the blueprint, because it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time and attention and resources from everyone to lift up this population of military and veteran caregivers. And I should note also all caregivers, because rising tide lifts all boats, and we always are very careful to think about that as a foundation, making sure that as we're supporting this core population, we are recognizing and amplifying the benefits for the broader caregiving population. And so, it's always so exciting to watch the speakers and the panel discussions, but it's also just seeing the power of the networking that's happening in the room, whether it's during the convening or at an after event, and just hearing the different ideas that are being shared, and let me help you with this. I think I might be able to pitch in, or I don't do that, but I know someone who does. Let me connect you. All to support this population is just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were saying, the blueprint wasn't just shaped by research and policy leaders. It's also been incorporating input from caregivers themselves, which I think is very crucial. What the Elizabeth Dole Foundation refers to as hidden heroes who are on those front lines, how does centering the caregiver voice change the kind of solutions that you ultimately arrive at?
That's a great question. And you're right, it has to be central to everything that we do. And in fact, we made sure that for every session related to building this blueprint, whether it was a working group on mental and emotional wellness, or it was a working group on how do we actually organize the blueprint, we made sure to have at least one caregiver in the room, but usually there were many more. And one of the things that is so valuable, and it's not the only thing, but one of the things that's valuable is sometimes good ideas aren't as great in reality if you're thinking about life from the perspective of being a caregiver. And it is invaluable to have that feedback and to have that voice. So, for example, there might be a resource that a nonprofit organization is trying to provide to caregivers, but it requires being available at the exact same time, for 5 weeks, and that's just not realistic for a lot of caregivers, as you know, and all of your listeners know. And so always remembering, wait a second, that sounds great, but is it really going to be great, practically speaking?
Right. Absolutely. The phrase culture of caregiving really comes up a lot at the foundation, in the foundation's work. What does that actually mean in practice, and what would it look like if we truly achieved that in this country?
Yeah. I love this question because this is a conversation that we have a lot, both internally at the foundation, but also with our partners. And it's one of the reasons that we have that fourth pillar of our strategic plan, and also that fourth category in the National Blueprint for Action around creating supportive ecosystems for caregivers. And ecosystem is a fancy word, but basically what we're saying is any system that a caregiver interacts with or comes into should provide optimal support. So that can look like a caregiver coming to a hospital with their veteran and being asked important questions by the doctors and nurses about what are you seeing at home? What really, and also how are you doing? It might look like a family at a synagogue being recognized by those who also attend services that, hey, you're caring for someone who served, and that must be really hard. What can I do to help you? Or it looks like a child missing some school days and the teacher recognizing, oh, that's because they're helping take care of mom or dad. And how can I step in to help that family so that that child has a full experience as a kid going to school? On and on and on, right? There's so many ways in which this could be manifest. And so what we say at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is our vision is one that I am sure you and your listeners share, which is we envision an America where all caregivers and the people they care for thrive. And thriving really means that they have optimal sense of purpose of life, optimal mental, emotional, and physical health. They feel supported financially. They can, set dreams and work toward them. And, everyone wants to thrive. And it can be harder if you are a caregiver. But all caregivers deserve to thrive, as well as the people that they're caring for. And it's going to look different for every person.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm nodding away and agreeing with you in my head with everything you said. I often, tell families that we meet with for professional purposes with our company, doctors need to start looking at two patients when you bring a loved one to the appointment, because often that person bringing them is the caregiver. And like going back to what I was saying about how the Elizabeth Dole Foundation helps to really elevate their voices and support them and, give them that platform and the resources to hopefully help them thrive is crucial, because you don't know what happens when they leave that office. When they go home, they need to go to sleep, or they have to take time off work, and it's a cycle. And so often the caregiver, as we all know, their health ends up suffering a lot more often than the one that they're caring for, because they're neglecting all of their personal needs for the needs of their loved one, thinking they're doing the right thing. So amplifying that, Elizabeth, is just tremendous. Before I go to my last question, I want to ask you a question. So, this is going to be the 11th convening, and, I don't know, have you been a part of 2, 3 convenings?
This will be my third convening.
Third convening. So when you look back over your last three that you've personally been a part of, what gives you the most hope for the future of, supporting our veterans and their caregivers?
I think it is the sustained level of focus and attention that we have seen through the series of convening. So the first one that I was part of in 2024 was really about sharing the results of this landmark RAND study and really raising awareness and understanding of what those findings were. And I will be honest that I wondered if not having something like a big new research report with really interesting findings to present at the next convening would maybe make it smaller or less vibrant. And instead, we saw even more people show up to our convening excited about our strategic plan that we were launching. And this year, once again, we're seeing record registration for the convening, and I think it's because all of the participants felt like they were part of creating this blueprint, and now here it is. And so it's that trajectory of sustained interest, increasing enthusiasm, and really having concrete tools that people can use that just feels really rewarding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And last question before I get to the final question. For you on the day of the convening, what's the one thing that you get the most excitement out of or that you look forward to the most?
Yeah, so the important thing about the convening is that it is part of what we call Fellows Week at the foundation. The fellows, of course, we've referenced are caregivers, military and veteran caregivers from across the nation who have applied to and been selected to this pretty competitive program that we run, this fellowship program. And they come in on usually a Sunday night or a Saturday night. None of them have met each other except for maybe on Zoom calls. And a lot of them are away from their care recipient for the first time in a very long time. And a lot of them have felt largely unseen in their homes and communities. And they show up and some of them cry when they land in the airport in Washington because it feels just so emotionally overwhelming. But at convening, which is usually 2 or 3 days into Fellows Week, you can see the ways in which the fellows have already bonded so closely in just a matter of 48 hours, 72 hours, and they bring that sense of connection and voice to the convening, and it is just, because you've been there, it is electric, and that wouldn't happen if we didn't have the type of lived experience that the fellows bring, but also the opportunities that, again, bringing it back to our founder, Senator Dole, knew was possible if we just provided the right resources and the right conditions for driving that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I know last year when we came, we invited several companies and individuals that, lived on the East Coast, the DC area. One of them, I don't know if you recall, I had introduced her to you and to Steve, and her name was Cheryl Beversdorf, and she has a public TV station in Virginia. Do you remember who I'm talking about? Yeah, and she was a Vietnam veteran nurse, and her first foray into her nursing profession was as a nurse in Vietnam. And I just, she's a tremendous woman, and she's just dedicated her life to supporting senior care and caregivers. And, I convinced her to, come to the convening, and she's been grateful ever since. And I'm hoping she'll come back again this year as well.
If she's listening, please come to the convening.
I'm going to tell her you said so, Elizabeth. And that's a direct order, and she's military, so she follows orders. But, and again, speaking of military, thank you for your son's service. He's at West Point, if I remember correctly, and so thank you in him for his service. But as we close, for anybody listening or watching today, including especially caregivers, what is the one thing you most want them to take away from this conversation, and how can they get involved and attend the convening? And if And if they're a caregiver in need of resources or community support, how can they access that?
Yeah, and really, thank you for asking this. I think it's the most important question. The first thing I want to say to any caregivers listening, but especially military and veteran caregivers, because we are here for you. You are not alone, and there are a lot of resources out there for you that we want to connect you with. And so it is as easy as going to our website, which is elizabethdolefoundation.org. You'll see right at the top of the landing page, there's a link where you can both learn about resources that we provide, but you can also sign up for both support and to join our community. On the support side, we have one of our core direct service programs is around resource navigation and the Bob Hope Critical Financial Assistance Fund. So thanks to the generosity of the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, we are able to provide emergency financial support for caregivers who are really in a bind. Maybe they can't get their car fixed, and so they can't take their care recipient to a doctor's appointment, or their utilities are about to be shut off because they are facing mounting medical bills. We can step in and cover those costs for you. Importantly, that's not where we end, though. We also follow up one-on-one to help think through, well, what are the other resources that are out there that we can connect you to? What other types of support might you need? We run a mental wellness workshop. Maybe you should participate in one of those. And so that's the support side. We have a lot of programs and offerings, and love it when caregivers find us and we can help them. There's also that connection piece, and I don't want to underestimate the power of that connection. And so we have a new platform. We call it EDF Connect, and if you are a military or veteran caregiver, you can sign up to join EDF Connect, and that brings you immediately into a community of others just like you, thousands of others just like you, who want to hear your story, or they want to share their story, or they want to talk about a life experience they've had that might be helpful to you if you're navigating something tricky. It's also a place to celebrate caregiver wins, or to provide support when someone's going through something hard. And please, if you are a caregiver and you're listening, please sign up and join EDF Connect. And then last, your question about how to join the convening. If you're here in the Washington area, we would love to have you join us. You can register for the convening on our website, which I just provided a few minutes ago. Come for an hour, come for the whole day. It's whatever works for you and what you're able to do. If you're not able to come to the convening, whether you live in Washington or not, we offer an opportunity for people to watch a live stream of the convening. And that is really important, as you understand, Lance, because so many caregivers just are not in a position to be able to come in person. And so you can watch the convening. If you happen to be in a VA waiting room, our convening will be broadcast live in every single VA waiting room, and so you can watch there as well. But please get involved. Let us help you. You can help us too. We always take donations, of course, if people are listening and want to support us, because we are a nonprofit and we need to be able to support our caregivers to the best of our ability, and we want to help as many people as possible.
Absolutely. I'm just going to add, if it's okay, Elizabeth, the convening is Tuesday, May 19th, and it's entirely free. There's not a registration cost. It's a great event and a lot of wonderful resources, and also that networking aspect. You may learn of different ways that you can help people, or that the foundation or some of the resources that will be there can help you. We encourage everybody to check it out. It's a tremendous event. We're looking forward to attending it again this year. And we just appreciate you, Elizabeth, and everyone at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation for the work you're doing. And we'll always be there to support you guys however we can.
Well, thank you. We have You're so in our hearts here at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We love all home care matters and the work that you do, and so thank you. We're excited to see you at the convening, and you're right. We will have an expo floor, so we're calling it an Innovation Expo of all different organizations that support military and veteran caregivers. And so if folks are able to make it, they'll be able to stop at each of those tables, maybe get to know a service dog, a therapy dog. That was one of my favorite things from last year. Or even get a little bit of respite. We provide chair massages in one of the areas of the expo floor. Or it can be about, I'm trying to learn more about how I can get support for my care recipient. What can you do? So lots of opportunities.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Elizabeth Field, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Elizabeth Fields for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.